Okay, good morning, fourth graders. We are going to continue our study in measurement. This is the second lesson in chapter 2. Now, this time in this lesson, you're going to be asked to compare units or two measurements, actually, measurements. Something like you might be asked to do this: compare 72 inches to 5 feet. Now, when we're comparing in mathematics, we are talking about greater than, less than, or equal to. So we have to determine if 72 inches is greater than 5 feet, less than 5 feet, or equal to 5 feet. But right now we can't compare them because one is in inches and one is in feet. Now remember, inches is like this. This is inch, and this is a foot. So unless you draw a picture that's 5 feet long, and then another picture that's 72 inches long, imagine how big a piece of paper that's going to have to be. Then you can compare which piece of paper is bigger than the other. Well, that's not really practical. So what you have to do is you have to rename. Remember, we rename things in fractions. Well, we have to rename one of these units. I either have to turn these feet into inches, or I have to turn the inches into feet. Now, usually what I do is I would change the bigger unit, feet, into inches, because we know that this is a nice round number. It's going to be a number, some multiple of 12. But inches, this might not work out to be. It might work out to be a multiple of 12, but it might not. Okay? So the first thing I want you to do is you're going to open up your notebook to the next clean page. You're going to write on here, Chapter 6-2, rename units of length. Okay? That's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be changing our customary units that measure length, and we're going to be renaming them so that they are the same as the other thing that we're comparing it to. You're going to skip a line after the purple, and then you're going to copy this down. So you're going to need to pause the video and copy this down. What I would do first, I didn't want to erase it and rewrite it, is I would write this green part at the top and draw an underline, and then put 12 inches equals 1 foot, 3 feet equals 1 yard, 36 inches equals 1 yard, 5,280 feet equals 1 mile, 1,760 yards equals 1 mile. So you're going to pause the video, you're going to copy the purple, skip a line, the green, skip a line, the red. And when you have all of that done, then you're going to restart the video. Okay, pause the video now. Okay, I'm assuming if you're back now, that means you've done all the instructions that I gave you in the beginning in your notebook. Skip a line between your last thing, 1,760 yards equals 1 mile. Skip a line and write this. Compare 72 inches to 5 feet. We're going to put here either a greater than, less than, or equal to symbol. Okay, so I'm going to put my little cheat sheet here. This is also on page 500 in the back of your book. It's at the very bottom of the page, but rather than have to flip back and forth all the time, it's better for you to have written it into your notebook. So let's talk about what's on this board first. This is the customary units to measure length, how long something is. And our very smallest unit of measure is an inch. Now, we learned yesterday that you could have a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, or a full inch, but the inch is the basic unit, and the 1/4 of an inch or a 1/2 of an inch is part of that smallest unit. We abbreviate inches as IN period. It's the only one that gets a period after it. And 12 of those inches will equal 1 foot. We abbreviate feet or foot as FT, no period. When you have 3 of these feet, you get what we call 1 yard. 1 yard is like that big ruler that I use in class, the one that comes from the floor up to about my hip. Now, if you looked on that yardstick, you would see that there are 36 inches. Well, that kind of makes sense. There's 12 inches in 1 foot, and there's 3 foot in a yard, so 3 times 12 is 36 inches. Okay, so a yard has 36 inches, or a yard could also be called 3 feet. Those are all 36 inches, 3 feet, 1 yard are 3 different names for the exact same unit of measure. Okay, they measure the exact same distance. It's just one, we call it inches. Now notice the smallest unit has the biggest number in front of it. So 36 of these itty bitty inches, or 3 of the feet, because feet are bigger than inches, we only need 3 of them, equals 1 yard. Okay, so the bigger the unit, biggest, middle, smallest. The smallest has the biggest number, the biggest has the smallest number, and the one in the middle has the middle-sized number. Okay, now besides measuring yards, you might measure, if I was going to measure my pencil, I would measure in inches. If I was going to measure how tall I am, I would measure in feet. And if I was going to measure how far it is to get from one side of the classroom to the other side of the classroom, I might use yards. If I wanted to measure the building from the street where we play wall ball to where the basketball courts are on the playground, then we would probably use yards. But if you want to measure something very far away, somewhere where something that you'd have to drive to get there, now you're going to use a unit called miles. Now miles is the biggest unit we have in customary measurement. But just like the yard could be broken up into feet or inches, a mile can be broken up into yards or feet. So 1,760 yards equals 1 mile, and 5,280 feet equals 1 mile. So 5,280 feet, 1,760 yards, and 1 mile all measure the same distance. Okay, just like we said up here on the, sorry, I'm trying to get here. Okay, just like we said above this green line, we said that yard was the biggest, had the smallest number. Feet was the medium, had the medium number. Inches was the smallest, had the highest number. It's the same thing here. Mile is the biggest, it has the smallest number. Yards is the middle, so it has the middle size number. Feet is the smallest, it has the biggest number in front of it. Okay, now we're going to use some of this to help us do conversion. Now, here we go. We have our original problem. Compare 72 inches to 5 feet using the symbols greater than, less than, or equal to. Well, I'm going to leave my 72 inches as 72 inches, but I'm going to change my 5 feet into some number of inches. We don't know how many yet. Well, I know that 1 foot equals 12 inches. So then 2 feet, I'm gonna put it next to each other. 2 feet is gonna equal 24 inches. That's 12 plus 12. 3 feet is going to equal 12 plus 12 plus 12, or 3 times 12, which we know is 36 inches. 4 feet is going to equal 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12, or 4 times 12, which we know is 48. And then 5 times 12 is 60. So sometimes it's helpful for us to make ourselves a table. Okay, to make ourselves a table. and write it down so that we don't have to try to figure this out every single time we want to do this conversion. So on the top, we have inches. So I'm going to label it as such. On the bottom, we're going to put the number of feet that it equals. And I'm making myself a little table here. And I hope that you are doing this at home. You are making yourself a table that looks like this one, just like I just did. If you didn't, you should pause the video and you should copy it now. Okay, so we said that 1 foot equals 12 inches, and 2 feet equals 24 inches, and 3 feet equals 36, and 4 feet equals 48, and 5 feet equals 60 inches. So we have our measurements here now in inches and feet, and if it's in our notebook, we can refer back to it later on if we need to. So now we know that 5 feet equals 60 inches. So I can compare now. I'm not going to put it up here, sorry. I can compare 60 inches and 72 inches, can I? They're both the same thing now. They're both in inches. So which is 72 inches greater than 60 inches, equal to 60 inches, or less than 60 inches? Now hopefully you told me it was greater than 60 inches. So if 72 inches is greater than 60 inches and 60 inches equals 5 feet, then 72 inches must also be greater than 5 feet. Okay? Let's look at another example. Before we look at the next example, let's talk about what we could do here. So you could either add, to solve this problem, 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 equals 60. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to equal the 5 feet. Or you could multiply, which I hope is what you would try to do now that you're almost ready for 5th grade, and you would say 12 times 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equals 60. Or you know, because of the commutative property of multiplication, 5 times 12 equals 60 also. Okay? So sometimes making a table can help you. Sometimes you don't need the table when you get really good at it. But in the beginning, it's not a bad idea to write down this table. Alrighty. So this is one where we're talking about inches and feet. What if I wanted to compare, let's say I want to do yards to inches. Okay, this time we went from the smaller unit with the bigger number to the larger unit with the smaller number. What if we did this? Let's copy this next one down. Okay, so let's say I asked you to take 2 yards and compare it to, well, to convert it, not even compare it, let's convert it to some number of inches. Okay, some number of inches. Now, sometimes you're going to have to either refer either to your table that you wrote down here in your notebook, this table, or you might have to go back to page 500. But we already know, if you look at that table, we already know that 1 yard equals how many inches? Look on your table. Right, 1 yard equals 36 inches. But they're not asking us to turn 1 yard into some number of inches. We're being asked to turn 2 yards into some number of inches. So all I have to do is, I could do one of two things. I could either times it by 2, or I could add 36 plus 36. Either way, I'm going to get the same answer. 36 times 2. 2 times 6 is 12. Put down the 2, regroup the 1. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 6 plus 6 is 12. Carry the 1. 3, 6, 1 is 7. 72. Either way, you get the same answer. So, 2 yards equals 72 inches. Okay, let's try another one. What if you were given, copy this one down in your book, what if you were given 18 feet and you were asked to turn it into some number of yards? Now before, we were going from yards to inches, and when we did that, because this was bigger, we had to either add or multiply. Well, now we're going for something smaller. Feet are smaller than yards. So that means the smaller unit has the bigger number, and the larger unit has to get a smaller number. So therefore, instead of either adding or timesing, this time when we go from feet to yards, which is smaller unit to bigger unit, we are going to have to either divide or subtract. Okay, divide or subtract. So, let's see how we're going to do this. If you look on your chart, it will tell you that 1 yard equals 3 feet. So what do you suppose we're going to divide our feet by to get a number of yards? Hopefully you said we're going to divide by 3. Okay, so if you do 18 divided by 3, I'm going to begin my answer over the 8. What times 3 equals a number equal to 18 or close to it without going over? Hopefully you said 6, and 6 times 3 is 18. So 18 feet is going to equal 6 yards. If you wanted to subtract to find this out, hopefully you're copying all this down. If you didn't, pause the video and catch yourself up. If you wanted to subtract, you would have to start at 18 and you'd have to take away 3. And then you'd get 15, and you'd have to take away 3, and you would get 12. And you would keep going until you got 3 minus 3 as your answer is 0. And when you got to 0, then you could just count how many 3s there were. So let me do that over here where we have some room. So it would be 18 minus 3. I'm going to use 2 different colors here so we can see all those minus 3s. 18 minus 3 equals 15. And we take away 3 again, and we get 12. And we take away 3 again, and we get 9. And we take away 3 again, and we get 6. And we take away 3 again, and we get 3, and then we take away 3 again, and we'll get 0. And now we can just count our 3s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that goes back to this answer here, 6 yards. So it's much easier to divide than it is to do repeated subtraction. But if you're drawing a blank, you can do repeated subtraction instead. Okay? So now we've done, when we went from a smaller unit to a larger unit, we had to divide or subtract. When we went from a larger unit to a smaller unit, we had to add or multiply. So that's what you should first be asking yourself. When you see the thing that you either have to compare, or by saying greater than, less than, or equal to, or convert 18 feet into an equivalent unit of measure, using a different unit, but an equivalent measurement, then you need to ask yourself, which one's bigger? And if I'm going from smaller to bigger, then I have to divide. And if I'm going from bigger, say I was given the 6 and you had to tell me how many feet, 6 yards. If I'm going from bigger to smaller, then I would multiply. Okay? Alrighty, let's try one more. Let's do one that involves miles now and see if we can do one that is miles and yards and feet. What if you were given 2 miles, 2 miles, and you were asked to compare it to, let's say 3,520 yards. 3,520? Yeah. 520 yards. Okay? That's what you're going to compare. And you have to tell me whether 2 miles is greater than 3,520 yards, if it's less than 3,520 yards, or if it's equal to each other. Okay, so it is easier to convert miles to yards. So we're going bigger to smaller. So remember, I'm going to put it down here. If you're going from larger to smaller, you are going to multiply. And if you're going from smaller to larger unit, then you're going to divide. Okay? So we're looking at miles and yards. Miles are larger than yards. So when you go from larger to smaller, you multiply. All right, so, well, what do I multiply? I know I'm going to multiply, and I know I'm going to multiply by 2. But what am I going to multiply to by? Well, you have to go back to your chart here. When to convert yards to miles, 1,760 yards equals 1 mile. But we're asked to find what equals 2 miles. So we have to multiply 2 times 1,760. 1,760. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 6 is 12. Put down the 2, regroup the 1. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 1 is 15. Put down the 5, regroup the 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. 3,520. That's what this equals. 2 miles equals this. These two are equivalent. Now, what about this to this? Is it greater than, less than, or equal? Right. It is equal to each other. Okay, let's try one more. Oops, I shouldn't have erased that on the bottom. I'm not saving myself any work here. So let's do larger to smaller, you then multiply. Smaller to larger, you divide. Okay, So what if I gave you, let's change color markers so that it separates. What if I gave you 5,280 yards, 5,280 yards, and you want to compare it to 3 miles. 3 miles. So we are comparing yards to miles. So we are going smaller, yards are smaller, to larger. So we're going to divide. Okay? I'm going to divide. What am I going to divide by? Right? The smaller number, 3. And what is my dividend in this case then? 5,280. So now we have to figure out, where am I going to begin my answer? Well, I'm going to begin right over my you know what? There's a mistake here. That's not what we're going to do. We are going to convert our miles to yards. It's easier to go backwards for this particular one because 5,000, what is 1 mile equal? Look on your thing here. What does 1 mile equal in yards? 1 mile in yards equals 5,280. Don't let this mess you up. This says 5,280 feet equals 1 mile. 1,760 yards equals 1 mile. So let's figure out how many feet 1 mile is. So how many yards is 1 mile. So it's 1,760 is 1. Plus, now I can either multiply this by 3 or I can add it 3 times. Let's multiply it by 3 because it's quicker. If this is 1 mile, then I have to do 2 miles of 1,760 yards and another one of 1,760 yards. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 6 is 18. Put down my 8. Regroup my 1. 3 times 7 is 21. Plus 1 is 22. Put down my 2. Regroup my 2. 3 times 1 is 3. Plus 2 is 5. Now I can compare, this is yards, this to this. So is 5,280 yards greater than, less than, or equal to 3 miles? That's right. Since these are the same, that means, and these are the same, then that means these two are equal to each other. Good. Okay.